Lily Greenberg Cole, former Biden official and at the Interior Ministry Department. Welcome to our screen.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start by asking you, you are a young and rising politician, and all your future is ahead of you. Why did you resign your official position and official appointment at the U.S. Interior Department?
So, I worked to elect the president. I worked for the administration, and ultimately I resigned because I could no longer serve at the pleasure of the president while he is, aiding and supporting and funding the genocide of the Palestinian people, and doing it with this narrative that it's for Jewish people and for Jewish safety. And I'm an American Jew. And I have, community and family that were impacted by October 7th. I'm very scared of anti-Semitism myself, but I know that Palestinian freedom and Jewish safety are not opposed to each other, and that what the president is doing and, giving Israel the weapons for ultimately makes all of us less safe.
Your resignation is a protest against the lack of the usage of American power for the good, as you put it. But isn't the initiative declared by the president and announced by the president on Friday afternoon a move forward towards achieving peace?
Absolutely, and it's something that should have happened months ago, before tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians were killed. It's definitely a step in the right direction, but if this deal is actually going to happen, then the president has to not just say that he wants peace and a ceasefire, he has to stop sending Israel the weapons that they're using to massacre innocent people.
How do you view Israeli response to the initiative by the president?
Some ministers...
Which is actually, I must add, it's an Israeli proposal in the first place.
Right. Some ministers in Netanyahu's government have said that they don't want the deal to make it past the first 6-week phase. And I think, again, if President Biden is serious about this, then he has to use all of the leverage at his disposal, which means stop sending weapons to Israel, to make sure that this becomes a lasting ceasefire.
So they only want a part of the agreement, the first phase of the agreement.
Yeah,
but not the second or the third.
Ministers have said, yes. Yeah.
Resigning on the anniversary of the Nakba, was that by design or was it by accident?
It was an intentional choice. As I said in my resignation letter, Nakba, means catastrophe in Arabic. Shoah, which is the Hebrew word for Holocaust, means catastrophe in Hebrew. I think there's something really devastating about the way that what a lot of Jewish people feel was our salvation from our catastrophe ended up in a catastrophe for Palestinians. And I wanted to, really highlight that any system that oppresses one group of people for another is unsafe. And again, that Palestinian freedom and Jewish safety are not in opposition to each other. And if we're going to have something, a peaceful, thriving future going forward, then we have to acknowledge that.
President Biden said that, and I'm reading here, quoting him, "Were there no Israel, there wouldn't be a Jew in the world that is safe." Do you agree with such a statement?
Absolutely not. I think Jewish people should be able to live in any country, including America, anywhere in the world, and feel safe and be free from persecution. I think the President of the United States saying that, as an American Jew myself, is really scary. And I don't think that, again, a country that requires the suppression of millions of people for another's freedom is safe for either people involved.
Is the Israeli policy, supported by the United States, bring security to Israel and Jews around the world, in your eyes?
No. Like I just said, I think October 7th made it very clear that the status quo does not keep Israelis safe, and that if we're going to create a thriving future with equality and justice and freedom for Palestinians and Israelis, then the status quo of occupation and apartheid has to end. Again, any system that requires the subjugation of one group for another's quote-unquote safety is not safe. That's not freedom.
Did you live in Israel?
I have never lived there. I've spent time there.
So how do you know about the subjugation?
I I have seen, I've been to the West Bank. I have seen some of the sort of restriction of movement of Palestinians, the checkpoints. I also was very lucky to make some Palestinian friends, Palestinian American, and people living in Palestine, and hear about their lives and experiences
So you
firsthand.
witnessed it firsthand yourself. Is what the Israelis doing in Gaza and West Bank, does that represent the Jewish value, the Jewish religion? Does it represent them?
I don't believe so. No. What I was taught about Judaism is that it is a tradition that's really steeped in justice. We have several values. One, pikuach nefesh, which is saving a life, is the highest. You can break any other commandment to save a life. There's this idea of B'Tselem Elohim, that everyone's made in the image of God. And I spent my whole life steeped in Judaism. I went to Jewish school. I have 20 years of Jewish education, and everything that I've learned about what it means to be Jewish, what Israel's doing to Palestinians, is counter to that. It's the least Jewish thing in the world to starve people, to make people refugees, to murder entire families.
You worked for Vice President Kamala Harris in 2019. Does the Vice President share the same views on the policy of the current administration in Gaza and in the Middle East as a whole?
I can't quite speak to the Vice President's beliefs, but I do, I think that if she does disagree, that this is an opportunity for her to make that position clear, and that she should be having those conversations with the President and really encouraging him to listen to the majority of the American people who want a ceasefire.
We all are gearing up for the elections, presidential elections on the 5th of November of this year, and everyone is supporting one of the two. There's some people who are not supporting any candidate. Who are you supporting in the up and coming elections?
I'll say I am terrified of another Trump presidency, and I was terrified of that in 2020, which is why I worked for Biden. I think it is up to President Biden to earn my vote, to earn the votes of the American people, and he can do that if he calls for and really, brokers a lasting ceasefire deal and stop sending weapons to Israel.
You were a young activist in AIPAC, which is the almighty and powerful Israeli lobby in the United States, and you know how powerful they are because you worked with them. People usually who work for AIPAC are diehards pro-Israel zealots, and you must have been one at the time. What changed? What made you transform from an AIPAC member, a supporter of Israel, a diehard in that aspect, to a pro-Palestinian, pro-rights, human rights of Palestinians? What transformed you?
So in the communities that I grew up in, being Jewish and supporting Israel were one and the same. Like, there was no daylight between that. And I also, I was not raised with a full picture of what Israel means for Palestinians. I did not really know about the Nakba. I didn't really understand the conditions Palestinians live in until I saw that for myself. And as I got older, I had a chance for my world to expand. I met Palestinians, I made Palestinian friends, I worked in human rights spaces, and was able to really see that what Israel's doing is in counter to both my values as a Jewish person, my value as someone who identifies as progressive, and counter to the world that I want to live in. And so I was able to transform and also really see, like I've said, that Jewish safety and Palestinian freedom they're not these two opposing things. They actually are connected, and they're not going to come without each other. And that if we do want to have a thriving future for the Israelis that I love and care about, for the Palestinians I love and care about, both of those people have to have freedom, self-determination, dignity, and fair and equal rights.
How difficult was the decision for you? I mean, you are young. You are 20-odd years. I don't want to say it to everybody, but how difficult. This is your career. You worked very hard. You were a brilliant student. You worked with Kamala Harris in 2019. You moved to work for the president. You were appointed in a very high position within the Interior Department. You worked for AIPAC, and also other Jewish organizations, I must add. How difficult was it for you to break with the administration and say, I'm not working for you guys?
It was challenging. I think from the very beginning, in October, I knew that I wasn't going to be in alignment with. It became clear to me that I disagreed with the president's policy, and I'll say that there's widespread dissent within the administration. People across the entire government who also think the same way that I do. At first, I wanted to try and do what I could from the inside. In particular because, as you mentioned, I worked hard. I'm the first person in my family to have an opportunity like this. I understand the weight of that, and I grew up with a lot of privilege, but my grandparents didn't even go to college. But ultimately, it became very clear to me that people with my perspective were not being listened to by administration leadership, and that I could no longer represent this administration if this is the choices that they're making that are, killing tens of thousands of innocent people, and also in the process making my community less safe. I think what Israel's doing and what the president is supporting makes Israelis less safe, and it makes American Jews less safe.
Is it increasing anti-Semitism?
I believe so. Absolutely.
Okay, you talked about your family, that you're first generation who went to college and graduated, and you achieved certain achievements. Can you talk to us about the story of your families? They are immigrants and they came to this country. Can you tell us where from and why and the circumstances, just to show the others that you are a survivor, your family at least, they are survivors?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I myself grew up with a lot of privilege, but my great-grandparents came to the United States in the early 1900s, escaping pogroms, which were bouts of anti-Semitic violence in Eastern Europe, where Jews in villages would be, hunted down and murdered. And they came to the United States. They changed their name at Ellis Island. They assimilated. They worked hard. They were farmers. Salespeople. My grandfather was a salesperson, and within just a few generations, right, I have the opportunity I went to an elite university. I worked for the president. I was appointed by the White House. Again, the weight of that is not lost on me, that this is really, that what I was doing is what, in a lot of ways, the American dream is.
Yeah.
But I think, what I also learned about being Jewish is that people did not always stand up for us when things were happening to our people in the past, and that you are obligated to take risks for people who are being harmed.
And you're standing up for the Palestinians.
Yes, and in doing that, I think also standing up for my people, because, like I said, all of our futures are connected. There is no safety if we are not all safe.
How does your community feel? How does your community feel about what you did? Resigning from a position appointed by the president, and that position you're a political appointee. How do they feel?
I don't think everyone understands my decision. I think some people unfortunately see it as, standing against Jewish people. As I've said many times, to me, there is no standing for Palestinians and standing against Jewish people. It is standing for all of us. And I think, I really encourage people in my community to listen to that voice inside of them that I'm sure is there, whispering that maybe this is wrong. Because that's the values that we learned. That's this idea of B'Tselem Elohim, that we're all made in the image of God. And I know that people know that it doesn't have to be this way.
I must admit, I think the number of people, percentage of Jewish community who supports your position are few. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that?
I mean, there's also some polling that came out last week says that over half of American Jews supported President Biden's proposal to halt weapons transfers to Israel if there was an invasion of Rafah, which we're seeing an invasion of Rafah right now. So that's progress to me. That shows that people in my community are at least, seeing that what's happening to Palestinian people is disastrous, and that the Israeli government, clearly is not prioritizing the hostages. And I think that, that I'm very optimistic about that polling.
But many Jews are sensitive towards seeing Jewish students demonstrating, for example, in Columbia and New York University, they are sensitive to what you've done as well. What would you say to them?
Again, that our safety and Palestinian freedom are not at odds with each other. That if we're going to have a thriving future for Israelis and Palestinians, there has to be equality, there has to be justice, there has to be an end to the status quo, because it doesn't keep us safe, and more violence will only come from this. You know, you can't bomb your way to peace.
My last question, time has caught up with us. Do you believe the ending of the occupation of Palestinian land by Israel will solve all problems?
I think it's step one. You know, I think it's step one to a long process, but I think in order for that process to start, Palestinians have to have freedom and equality.
Lily Greenberg Cole, a former Biden administration official at the Interior Department, we thank you for this exclusive interview, and we thank you for your insight, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you, Tal.
Thank you.